Frank. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of Building Returns hosted by RadioW.O.R.K.S. My name, as always, is John Stokoe, and my business partner, Roger Burrows, and I founded a company called Source My Property, which is a property development and investment portfolio building firm in the South Wales of the United Kingdom. We're rapidly expanding across the whole of the UK, and funny enough, today are signing contracts for Scotland and also into Europe as well. So lots of exciting stuff happening here. This show is not really about me, it's about other people though. And the show is called Building Returns. It's all about the movers and shakers in the property and real estate industry around the world. And my role is to showcase people that are doing things differently, people that are doing things better than everybody else, and really their opportunity to share their original flavor to our viewers around the world. Tonight, I have the esteemed pleasure of showcasing a UK property legend. He's a property guru and mentor, philanthropist, Frank Flegg. Sorry, Frank. Morning, Frank. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm good. Thanks, John.
Good to have you on board here. Before we get into it, Frank, can you give the listeners just a brief background on yourself and your journey pretty much coming up to where we are today?
Yeah, sure. So I was actually, by training, a secondary school science teacher. I taught in inner city school in Nottingham for a couple of years and really bought my first property, actually, with my first ever paycheck. I couldn't get a mortgage without a paycheck, so I'd already offered on the house, got my mortgage sorted, and took my paycheck to my mortgage broker the first month that I got a paycheck. And that was the start of my property journey. I left teaching just over 10 years ago, 10 and a half years ago, and have been full-time in property since then. Absolutely.
So you knew from early on that property was definitely a vehicle to some form of financial enrichment, fulfillment, or lifestyle.
Definitely. I can remember being a student and looking at the rent I was paying each month and the price of houses on the street that I was living in, thinking, if only I could buy student properties, I'd never have to work. Yeah, it's funny, full-time in property, I probably work harder than I've ever worked. But over the last 10 years, I've built a portfolio of 67 properties now that I own. Starting with nothing really, starting with a few £1,000s that I'd saved up as a teacher, and have really enjoyed the journey.
Okay, so that's a brief journey. We'll get back into the mechanics of how you actually built that portfolio. But currently now, what is your business right now? What is it called, and what does it do specifically?
Yeah, sure. So about 18 months ago, I started the Frank Partnership. I achieved financial freedom about 3 years ago with my portfolio and the passive income from it. And I set my sights on ending homelessness globally. That was what I set myself as my big, audacious, hairy goal about 3 years ago. And I looked at how I could do that. Funnily enough, talking about my student years, my friend that I lodged with had a garage, and 4 of us lived in the house. And I can remember having discussions with them about how we could go and interview homeless people, buy them a McDonald's meal, sit with them, pick someone that we felt we could help, take them to a charity shop, buy some clothes, help them clean up, print them a CV, and help them. They could live in our garage while we helped them to get a job and stuff. And it was like a little idea that we had that came crashing down when the guy that owned the house said, yeah, so we're going to leave for uni each day with all our laptops and all our TVs, and we're going to leave someone who like with the keys to our house. So it kind of never started, but it was that ethos of being able to utilize property to help people to transform their lives when from a state of homelessness to being housed and employed, that kicked that off. So 3 years ago, I sat down and I looked at how much good I could do with the financial resources that I have at my disposal compared to the good that I can do from a housing the homeless perspective if I were to leverage myself. And so I went down the route of franchising. So we kicked off the Frank Partnership, which is a franchise, a national franchise, currently national franchise of property investors who are building their own portfolios, building their passive incomes and net worth whilst housing the homeless. And so as of today, we have 19 partners across the UK. Tonight, 70 people will sleep in one of our beds rather than on the streets. And cumulatively, we've avoided 25,000 nights where people would have been homeless but have actually slept in one of our beds.
Oh, that's brilliant, Frank. And this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to get you on the show. I was discussing this with a colleague of mine earlier, how the show pretty much evolved from being purely property-based to the goodness that is in people, the goodness that people are doing. I see one of my previous interviewees is on at the moment now, and his main passion is he builds homes and developments in Western Australia. And their view is to take all the energy from solar energy and to actually sell energy back into the grid. And when I interviewed Kevin back in the day, that really twigged something in me. And I really sort of changed the direction, changed the focus from just being purely property into what property can actually enable you to do. So, and that's pretty much what your journey has been. You started off obviously very young, finding your first property, buying your first property as a student, and then understanding that would be a vehicle to enable you to be financially free, for you to then focus a lot more onto more, let's just call it more important things, which is the others that are out there. And it's that old analogy of, if a plane's going down, you put your own oxygen mask on first before you look after somebody else. So tell me about, before we got sort of full blown into the charity, can you tell me about the property techniques or some of the property strategies that you use to build up the portfolio, but more importantly, how you managed to do it so fast? And it comes back to that old question of utilizing other people's money, or some different strategies that you use to build up that portfolio to enable you to become financially free.
Yeah, sure. So I had about £15,000 when I started. So when I left teaching, that's what I had in my bank account. I focused on, sorry, John?
10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I focused on, I focused on building a portfolio without, when you don't, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, don't they? So when you don't have a big chunk of money, you have to make it work otherwise. So we worked on really, sophisticated strategies. We did a lot of, and still do a lot of, building portfolios for high net worth individuals who would don't want to spend the time, don't want to spend the effort, or take the risks of investing off their own back. And what we do for them, and have done for the last decade, is we've sourced properties in good areas for them, we've refurbed them for them, and then we've tenanted them for them as out of the box investments. And that's been one of our strategies. On the Frank Partnership, we actually have 54 different strategies that we use for monetizing property. And our motto is that no lead crosses our desk without us monetizing it in some fashion. And I obviously I can't go into all the strategies this morning. It would be a long. Do
you have a consolidated website or contact or somewhere where we could go, or the viewers could have a look at, to get a brief understanding on what you do?
Yeah, if you take a look at our website, probably the best place to start. It's www.frankpartnership.co.uk. That's our website, and the link that's on the page at the moment with the /invest is a free webinar that I've put together to give people an overview of 5 of our most lucrative, most commonly used no money down strategies for purchasing property. So they can feel free to have a look at that, guys. And those 5 strategies, if I'm honest, are the culmination of 10 years of working out how best. So when I say we build portfolios for investors, most people would make, we're talking about £100,000 properties here, where we've sourced them at a bit of a discount and we're selling them at market value. Most people would make maybe £5,000 on one of those deals. We average about 20. And the reason that our margins are so high is because we put a lot of our effort into systemization and understanding conveyancing well. So ordinarily, just to give an example, I won't go off on a tangent for too long, but just to give you an example,
this is interesting.
Ordinarily, when people flip property, they purchase and then do the work, tenant the property, and then sell it on. But the problem is you've got all of the acquisition costs and then the sale costs and the risk of not being able to find an investor, etc., as well as financing the deal while you own it. And that's what cuts out so much of the profit. So we've got a sophisticated way of flipping. We call it turning discounts into cash flow, whereby the investor, we find the investor, we find the vendor, and they buy direct, but we make the difference between the two prices.
Okay. So could I see if I can summarize that quickly? So let's just say you have a property, let me just think, that the seller's willing to sell for whatever, £80,000, and there might be a little bit of work, called a couple of £1,000, but somebody might be willing to buy that property for £100,000. Effectively, transactions going between 80 and 100, and you guys are sitting in the middle with pretty much that full difference, minus the usual costs of in and out. Is that right? Is that about right? Have I got it right?
Yes, except there's not the usual costs of in and out because we're not actually buying it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. You don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. So the vendor's selling it to the investor. We make the 20. We spend the 2 on the refurb, to use your numbers, and we've netted 18 there, whereas ordinarily you'd probably net 5 or 7 if you did it in a conventional way. And so the 54 strategies are all taking a tried and tested method and then making it more efficient, basically.
Okay. No, that's very good. Now, I know, just coming back to that one, I would say politely, there's going to be a few solicitors out there that are going to be scratching their heads on that one, but I'm sure you do have an army of people that are well knowledgeable and well versed on how to properly and ethically put this all together. So, and this is why I've got you on the show, Frank, because I know that's what you stand for. So anybody who's watching this, I've seen a couple of these personally. I know, and this is why I've got Frank on the show. He is an absolute wizard and a legend at putting these things together, taking stuff that is normal and standard that people only think that's the only way to do it. And Frank tears it apart and makes it a hell of a lot more efficient and monetizes it a lot better for all of the parties involved. So when I had my initial interview for the show, we were talking about all the multiple wins, how everybody's winning. So in your scenario, the seller is winning because they're managing to unload their property, which they previously hadn't done. You guys are monetizing, obviously, because you're a business and you've got charitable aspects as well that you need to. The buyer or the investor is winning because they're getting a cash flowing or an income generating property on their portfolio, and also that you're housing somebody else, whether it be a homeless family or a normal retail family, whatever you want to call them, into that. So we've got multiple wins across the board, and this is what you, in a swift process, are facilitating. So that's fantastic. Any other little quick ones you can throw at us before we move on, Frank?
Yeah, just before we move on, John, if that's all right, I want to pick up on how important it is to do this ethically. So in that example, right from the start, the vendor knows what their property's worth. We're really clear with them right from the initial telephone call. Your house is worth 100, but we'll be able to pay 80 for it. You'll receive 80 at the end. And similarly, the investor is crystal clear that we've sourced the property at a discount and that we're making some money in the middle in order to pay for our time. So I feel that transparency is absolutely critical. You're right. Some solicitors might be looking at this thinking, well, how do you do that? We do it by having really switched on conveyancers who know what they're doing, and we also make sure that all of our paperwork is absolutely accurate. And so, yeah, if people are trying to put these together, feel free to contact me because it's really easy to put them together wrong. I'd mention one aspect, and if we stick with that transaction for a moment, lots of the strategies on the Frank Partnership gel together. So very rarely will we do a transaction where there's only one strategy. More often than not, we'll have 3 or 4. So let's take that property as an example. Some of our listeners might be thinking that how do you find full market value investors? You know, where do you get them from? Well, what we find is there are loads of people who would like to do some good with their money. And earlier I called them high net worth individuals, but really they're people with £30,000, £50,000, who perhaps have a diversified portfolio. They've got a pension, they've got some stocks and shares, and they'd like to hold some property, but they don't want to be in property. They don't want to be a property investor and do it all themselves. Those people probably went into their retirement 10 years ago before the credit crunch, expecting an 8% return on their funds. Today, they're probably getting them 1.5%, something like that. Well, by buying a property, they can get back up to that 8%. So there's a financial return for them, which ticks the box, full market value, 25% deposit, make a decent return. But the altruistic part of it, we find really appeals to people. So when we tell them you can make this return and you can house 4, 5, 6 homeless people, that's when they get really excited, and that's where they tell their friends and family, etc. So what we do is, once we've done that refurb, we then partner with local charities. So we'll go to local charities and we'll say to them, you're doing a great job at helping your clients to rebuild their lives. And it can be anything. It can be refuges for battered women fleeing abusive relationships. It can be people coming out of prison. It can be refugees. We're completely non-discriminatory. We will house anyone in need who are actively engaged with the charity, because we work with the charity. We can't be experts at all of these different client groups, but we can partner with the charity. So we do the property bit, and we either lease the property to the charity, which, if you think about it, is great. The charity gets security of tenure, so they get the property for 3 years, 5 years. The investors happy because they've got a secure income for that period of time.
A hands-off investment.
Exactly. And we look after the property for the time, for that period of time. If the charity's not in a position to take a lease, then what we also do is we'll work with the charity to help the clients access housing benefit. So that's how we do it. I don't know how that worked for your international viewers, but if you have some kind of social security that can help with housing, that's how we fund this in the UK.
Okay, so can you run me through a typical example of one? You're talking about multiple tenants, and we probably moving into HMOs and that sort of stuff, especially when it comes to charities. I'm sure you do house some families, but when we're getting into HMOs, we're changing things slightly. Can you run me through an example of a property, without giving the specific numbers away, what the property was, what its standing was, what was done to change it, and how we then ended up in that process of a house of multiple occupation? Because from that point of view, investor is very happy because he's getting a much better return and a hands-off return on his investment.
Yeah, so the sweet spot in the UK at the moment is to take a 4-bedroom detached property with 2 or 3 reception rooms and turn that into a 6-bed HMO. Okay. And if that property is on 2 stories, this is about to change, but currently in the UK, if it's on 2 stories, you don't require planning permission and you don't require a license. So you can then operate that as a HMO and house 6 homeless people in that property. In terms of works that need to be done to that property, it's minimal. You insert fire doors, you put wide smoke alarms in, but largely they share the kitchen. That kind of property will have 2 bathrooms usually, which helps. And it's a ready-made property for up to 6 people. Is that what you meant by that question, John?
Yeah, pretty much. So you're looking at obviously, if you're getting a property that's in livable condition, if it's going to be for family, obviously it's a slightly different aspect. You might upgrade it to a slightly better standard. So realistically, looking with fire and regulations and all the rest, 5, maybe 10,000 at a stretch.
To turn a property that's already in okay condition into one that's HMO compliant, you're probably looking at, I'd say probably 1,000. If you budgeted £1,000 a room, that would work. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. No, that's fine. And then obviously once you're doing that, you're working closely with the local authorities, and you're already on contact with those local authorities. And I know there's queues of people waiting for these sort of homes. And it's quite sad because there's so many private landlords that aren't aware of this and aren't aware of how secure it can actually be, is that you're handing over your property for 5 years and they're going to look after you. And in quite a few areas around the country where they're paying you market-related rents, and you as the investor are going to be doing slightly better because you're not having to pay the estate agent their 10 or 12 or 14% plus VAT, plus the breakages and plus that sundry account that you have to keep, as opposed to you handing it over to either an authority or charity who might lease it for 5 years. And I assume I'm right in saying they'll give it back to you in 5 years' time in the same condition as when you initially rented it out.
Yeah, we generally do it on an internal maintenance contract. So we look after the exterior of the property and the boiler, and they look after everything else inside the property. That's how we normally do it. So yeah, they generally keep it in good condition because the charities are handpicking their clients that are ready for this level of responsibility. So they might be working with a few hundred clients, but they're going to pick their top 6 because these beds, we don't want them to house the same person for 3 years. That'd be a waste of the bed. Typically, the charity will move someone in when they're unemployed. They will live there for 6 months, 9 months. They'll get a job. They'll save some money. They'll practice living with others in a home. And then at the point at which they've got a job, they can then move into private rented because we can give them a landlord reference. They'll pass a credit check. They're now employed. They're in a position to be able. They've saved up enough money for a deposit. They're in a position to access the regular rental market. But the beauty of picking people that are likely to move on successfully move on, is that it frees up the beds quicker, and then you can have your next 6 people in. So the project within the Frank Partnership is called Stepping Stones for exactly that reason. People step into the property, they build their lives with the help of the charity and having a home, and then they move on, and it becomes a stepping stone in their journey back to a life that's more fulfilling.
Sure. And how long have you been doing this, and how many people have you helped, or how many beds have you made available over that period?
So we started experimenting with stepping stones about 3 years ago, and we've formalized it and systemized it. But over that period of time, 25,000 nights someone has slept in a stepping stones bed rather than on the street or sofa surfing. So we've avoided 25,000 homeless nights, if you want to call it that. Tonight, 70 people will be sleeping in one of our beds rather than on the streets.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's fantastic. And that's exactly what I'm focusing on now with this show, Frank, is it's not just about the property, it's about the good that you can do through that property journey. And we do have a responsibility. Houses are meant to be homes for people, and they're supposed to put roofs over people's head. And yes, there are unfortunately some individuals that have taken bad direction or been forced into a bad direction or for whatever reason. But there needs to be people out there that have that charitable aspect, that can be there, that can, step up and help them out. And that's exactly what you're doing. Sure, obviously there is a monetary benefit to it at the end of the day. But at the way that I'm seeing this, very simply, my takeaway from that is you, Frank, are changing people's lives for the positive. And that's massive. That's the big thing. We can easily you can go straight back to your previous property journey and be the greedy landlord, but you haven't. You're mixing both. Yes, obviously we have to generate capital, we have to generate income, whilst you yourself will end up in one of those homeless beds. So you've got to look after yourself. But at the same time, I personally believe the more income and the more that we can create, I don't want to say for myself, it sounds greedy, but the more that we can create here, the more knowledge, the more leverage, and the more network we have to be able to leverage that out and assist other people by doing good when we focus on what we're doing and utilizing that. So, from myself and everybody involved in the show, obviously humble gratitude and thanks to everybody that you've housed. Frank, this is the time of the show where I get you to speak to the viewers, get to the listeners. Is there anything that you want? Are you looking for investment? Are you looking for staff? Or what are you looking for? What do you need? How can we help you?
Thank you, John. In a few ways, actually. I think a good point to start off on is the website. Have a look at the Frank Partnership website. I've shared a webinar with you as well, a free webinar, so feel free to take a look at that. That will give you an idea of some of the transactions that we do. And after you've had a look at both of those, you'll probably be in one of two categories. You'll either be sat there thinking, I'd like to be involved. I want to put some of my money in property, but I don't want to do this. There's no free ride. I think you called me a guru earlier, John. I don't consider myself a guru at all, but I've heard I've heard gurus stand up and say, passive income from property, it's easy, etc., etc. I disagree. I think property is hard work. I think it's highly leveraged. I think it's highly lucrative, but I never pretend that it's easy. People have to apply themselves in order to make property work. So you'll either be sat there thinking the hard work's not for me, but I do have some money and I'd like to be involved. And if you're looking to get involved, there's a contact us page on the website. Please drop me a line. Whether it's you want to buy a property, whether it's you want to invest money and don't even want to own a property, we're FCA accredited, so we can take funds from individuals and plough them into that Stepping Stones project to house the homeless. We give a guaranteed 5% return on investment, so we're forever looking for funds for people, and of course you've got the security of the FCA accreditation there to reassure people. So that's one class of person, if you like, that wants to support and be involved and benefit from the returns of either owning property or not, but without investing the time. The other category of person is if you watch that webinar and you listen to some of those transactions, and on that webinar I actually put the actual numbers that we've achieved, and some of them are franchisees, so people that have never done property before. They've come on the Frank Partnership and then they've done a deal that's bringing them in $3,000 a month from a single transaction, as an example. If you're sat there after watching that and you think, I'm really interested in that, then get in touch, because we can explain how you can become a partner in your part of the country. We're actually about to expand into Nepal to start. I don't know if you know, but they've had massive issues for years now since the huge earthquake. And so we're looking at setting up a Stepping Stones housing project out there. So if you're in different parts of different parts of the world and you're interested in housing the homeless, then we'd love to work with you. But if you're in the UK... And
that's as a franchise, Frank?
Say that again?
So that's as a franchise?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, so far we've only franchised nationally, but we are keen to franchise internationally, because only by having partners around the world will we end homelessness globally. So we need people who are in property and have a heart for housing the homeless to grow our mission, really. So those are the two ways to get involved. We're always looking for both, because that means we can help more people.
That's fantastic. If you have a look at the young fellow that was on, not last week, the week before show, he was a young Kiwi fellow called Karen Goss. He currently lives in Bali, and he has a very similar mindset to you towards homelessness. In fact, his mission is to end homelessness in New Zealand. So if you've got the time, look him up, just drop him a note, and you never know, there could be some form of cohesion there.
Absolutely.
And that's what it all comes down to. From my point of view, it's all about, we can have all the knowledge in the world, but if we don't have a powerful network that sits underneath us, whether that be a power team, whether it be finance, whether it just be contacts around the world, it diminishes our capability. So from a networking perspective, what do you do to get out there and get your brand out there? So what do you do for network capabilities?
Sure. So I see it as my mission to make people aware of the Stepping Stones project. I think a lot of people in property actually like the idea of utilising property for housing the homeless, but like you said earlier, don't know how to. The fear factor is quite high, etc. Excuse me. Interestingly, a lot of the properties we purchase have been empty for 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, which is a crying shame when, you know, a mile down the road there's people in sleeping bags. I'm always happy to speak. So I speak at all manner of events, property related, non-property related, basically anywhere where there will be people, there may be people who are interested in getting involved in any of those different ways. And also I'm quite active on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I write articles on LinkedIn and respond to posts and questions, etc. on LinkedIn. I run seminars as well. So people that want to perhaps get going in their local area and want a bit more support, I run seminars for helping people to get rocking and rolling in their own area.
Oh, that's brilliant, Frank. Thanks very much. So we've got all the contact details we need to get hold of you. You know, Frank, we've gone through everything. We've gone through the beginning, from your student days to housing one fella and taking a TV and your laptop off to university with you, and your evolution into, and I'll call you a property guru. You can turn me down. It's fine. But I know you are. Anybody that comfortably knows 54 different strategies how to monetize a property, you're a guru. You know, and I'll say that purely on the basis that there's people out there that think they know one or two and consider themselves gurus. So no, you certainly are. And you've evolved into exactly what the show's about. It's about the giving. It's about the gratitude. It's a philanthropic angle that we have there. And I mean, to end homelessness globally is, I don't know. I think about it. What greater challenge, what greater gift can you give the earth, the world, the planet than having that mindset? You know, and my view is, you know, if you shoot for the stars and make it to the moon, you've got a hell of a long way. So I really support you on your mission, and this is why I wanted to have you on your show, on the show. Before we finish off though, Frank, gratitude. I'm a firm believer in gratitude and being grateful for everything. Provides abundance for others out there. But I just want to ask yourself, what do you feel? I almost don't even have to ask this question, Frank. You know, it's a case of, what do you think is ethically right? What do you think is morally correct in today's world for fellow man and environment? And what are you doing about it?
I think we all have a role to play. It's really interesting. I'm reading a book at the moment. By Tim Ferriss, his most recent book actually, and it's Tribe of Mentors. If you've read it, and it's snippets from quite successful people from around the world. And I'm a Christian myself, and so I come from a perspective of giving a percentage of however little you have, and as you have more, then you give the same percentage, but the percentage becomes that small percentage is of a greater pie, if you like. And I would always encourage people to do that. So if you've got one buy to let and you think, well, I can't house homeless people, I need the income from that buy to let. Yeah, but you could donate 10% of your rent or 10% of your profit to shelter. And then when you've got a second property, you put a shelter's a UK charity, by the way, that houses the homeless. And then when you get your second one, you donate 10% of that. And that cumulative effect is massive. I think people often wait too long for giving back. Because if you think, let's say everyone decides they need 50 properties before they give back. Well, all the people that stop at 30 aren't ever going to give back, if in that example. This book actually, so that's where I sit, and I was challenged recently by this book, because the person there said she sees a lot of students come out of university and they try and give back loads straight away, whereas actually her advice is that they invest in their career and build the pie, build their net worth, so that they can give much more later on. And It's an interesting challenge. And I think the answer probably lies somewhere in between. But I think that as a society, we have enough food globally. we have enough shelter globally, and we have enough clean, fresh water, but yet people starve to death every single day. That's not okay in my book. So if you're sat there, if we're sat here, not contributing in any way because we're waiting until we have a bigger pie, that just doesn't seem logical to me. I think we can all rein in, we can all tighten our belts, we can all rein in our spending by a percentage. And if it's hard, do it by 1%. Take 1% of your salary and just get used to donating it. And then that can grow to 3% and 5%. And if we all did that, you can read book after book after book about abundance, but you attract more of what you give out. So you start giving out, and lo and behold, opportunities pop up, and you become your pie grows because of that, of the vibe that you're giving out. But I just think if I could nail down that one thing, and that's what I do. And I think to an extent, I'm a little bit sad that I took. So I'm 36 next month. So I started thinking about this when I was 18, and I started doing this when I was 32. And that's the bit that I'm a bit sad about, really. I could have been giving back a lot more a lot earlier, and I'm making up for it now, and I'm determined to make up for it. But I think that would be my encouragement to people is, if you're not doing something today, make sure you do something tomorrow and make it a habit. And if it's a habit, grow.
Well, that's exactly the point, and that's why I wanted you on the show, Frank. Is you say you started a little bit late. You're doing a hell of a lot more than 99% of the people out there are actually doing. The very fact that you, in a form of education, can actually help people make that difference and change their mindset of that post-university to start giving that little bit, and also from a gratitude perspective. And we know from gratitude becomes abundance as well. And then with more abundance, you have more that you can be grateful for, that you can be charitable or philanthropic about. So just that message itself is fantastic. Wisdom is the ability to learn from other people's, I don't want to call it mistakes, but from other people's lessons, so to speak. So you are key in that. Frank, that's pretty much what we have time for today. From my side, from the radio show's Building Returns, we are Source My Property. We're doing similar stuff to what you're doing out there, slightly different angle. It is all about the education. It is all about getting it out there, getting the message out there, and we are collecting everybody together. People that are that are making a difference, that are doing things different. And you are quintessentially doing that. You've got the property angle, the guru side of things. You've got that side tied down. You know exactly how to monetize anything, 54 different ways to do it. You're expanding globally. And most importantly is that there's this very, very strong underlying ethic to help the homeless and house the homeless. And I think that's a formidable challenge, and I think it's an honorable challenge. And I genuinely thank you on behalf of the radio show and everybody else out there. So from our side, Frank, thank you very much. If there's anything else you want to say, please now.
No, I just want to say thanks for inviting me on the show, John, and it's been an absolute pleasure, so thank you.
It's been fantastic to have you on. To everybody out there in property land, again, this has been Building Returns, hosted by RadioW.O.R.K.S. I'm John Stokoe, and we'll catch you next Thursday, not this Thursday. We've got Frank early on a Monday morning. He's a busy man with kids and all the rest. So we'll catch you next Thursday at our usual time of 8 o'clock. Frank Flegg, it's been an honor to have you. Great to know you, and I wish you all the success in the future.
Thanks, John. Cheers. Take care.
Cheers. Have a great day. Cheers. Bye-bye.